So thank you very much for the invitation to speak at the ASREN meeting again this year. APAN and ASREN have been working together to form a closer and closer relationship, which I think is starting to come together very, very well. So what I'd just like to quickly talk about is to just contrast the situation that we have in Europe, in the Arab states, Africa and so on, with the Asia Pacific. Something to keep in mind is that more than half of the world's population lives within only essentially 1/3 of the globe. It is a very large and diverse, culturally diverse area, and it is rapidly emerging and growing economically, scientifically, in education and so on. The proportion of global research and development in the region is accelerating and will overtake many of the Western countries over the next 10 years. The level of education is growing rapidly, and there is a very strong focus in the research and education activities in the region around things that benefit society. So things like food, things like health, as well as research and education that underpin those things. And so the situation that APAN finds itself in is in a community that has this incredible diversity, this incredible range of pressures that's placed upon it to bring together under one umbrella a range of very different kinds of organisations. APAN was formed just before 1995 in various discussions. That was the thinking and early talking phase. Then we moved into the planning phase, and now more the doing, where there's over now 16 economies as members of APAN, primary members, and another 22 or so various affiliates and industry associates and so on, who basically work together in a very gentle partnership, if I can call it like that. APAN was legally incorporated a few years ago, so it can actually be a company, it can sign contracts, it can own assets and so on. But the very key message around APAN is this loose partnership. It's all volunteer-based largely, it's a very low income community, and it has many investors, many link owners, many contributors within the region and outside of the region. The European investment, the American investment and others have greatly grown the community and the infrastructure within the region. And APAN really started to solve the problem that in the mid-90s, the costs in the region were such that two adjacent countries in the Asia Pacific found it cheaper to buy a link to Seattle than to put a link between the two countries across the border. They could see each other. You know, Japan and Korea, for example, 150 kilometres apart, it was cheaper to buy a 10,000 kilometre link, both of them. So APAN started with very small but a very large number of links, but very low bandwidth links within the region. And what you end up with today is a network that, if I'm wearing a technical hat, I would not call technically optimal. However, I would call it politically optimal. This is taking advantage of many funding opportunities. I would point out the obvious, and Salem made the point yesterday, that you probably don't need that many links between Asia and the US. We probably need more links between Asia and Europe, through South Asia, through the Middle East, through Africa and so on, and also through the North, through the Russian Federation and so on. But we have more than enough redundancy going across the Pacific now. And you can see all of the various project activities that have led to these links being formed, but because they're formed underneath the APAN umbrella and the common acceptable use policies, it means that all of these links are shared. They're all available to the whole research community. And over the last 15 years, we've seen these links grow from 0.5 megabit or less. Many of them early on were satellite-based links. They've all become terrestrial links now, and some of them are multiples of 10 and shortly multiples of 100 gig links across the region. If you look in terms of the investments within the region, a lot of the investment comes from those member economies. It is very heavily invested by the Asian community in their own benefits, with contributions, as I said before, from the US, and particularly the great contributions from the TAIN project and across South Asia to connect into the wider APAN community. And those links change every month. So every time I show you a map, in another month I've got to update it again. So please have a look at the website for the latest version. Now I think we've got enough of an idea in this room in particular of the benefits of the NRENs, the impact they have in terms of enabling research and education activities to occur. and the value of their, their contribution to society, grows exponentially with the number of sites, the number of schools, the number of universities and research centres and so on that are connected. Many of the NRENs in the region provide national services, certificates, grid computing, cloud services, storage, collaboration tools and so on. And they're very much focused on that burst capacity. One of the things that I've had in many conversations with our government is that they look at the network bandwidth usage on the various links and they go, oh, you're only busy 3% of the time. The problem is not the sort of average traffic across these links. It's the ability for a researcher to say, I need to move a terabyte of data from here to here in 5 minutes. You only need to do that once a week, but you have to be able to do it quickly. If you have to trickle it through and it takes more than a week to do it, researchers stop doing their work. What you get when you aggregate the NRENs, you get the regional R&E networks, is you get a community and an environment that can collaborate on the common interest across the region. They can aggregate the demand and supply, especially on the international connectivity. They can work with industry, people like Eves and so on, to identify where the best investments may be within a region. And they support these cross-border activities. A lot of research and education now is becoming more and more globalised. Education and the whole MOOC discussion is becoming obvious. Research has been globally collaborative pretty much forever, but now through the internet it's almost ubiquitous, and if you can't support it, again, you are stopping your researchers from doing what they want to do. The challenges for the NREN, or for the regional RENs, is just the sheer diversity of the NRENs that we're dealing with. The APAN community covers, as I mentioned before, more than half of the world's population. But within that, we have economies ranging from 3 of the 4 world's largest, most populous countries, down to very, very, very small countries and very small economies. The level of maturity, the level of development ranges from the very well-developed through to the very developing and emerging economies in the region. The individual NRENs within each economy are incredibly diverse as well. Some of them are formed as standalone companies, as industry partnerships, as partnerships of universities. Some of them are run out of government agencies. Some of them are run by lead entities, the National Supercomputing Centre, the large university of a particular country. And so when you try and talk to NRENs as a group, you find that they have a very different approach and a very different business model. Their funding models range from subscription and memberships within the country. Some of them get occasional grants from the government, and so they're always begging for more. Some provide fee for services and so on. And what they offer varies dramatically as well. Obviously, they all provide connectivity, but most of them provide additional services across the top of that, as I've listed there. And having listened through the chain session yesterday, harmonising is hard. Getting all of the infrastructure investments across a region, even within a country, is hard. Getting it to do it across an entire check of the globe is incredibly hard. And to give you an idea of some of the investments, in my own country in Australia, we've had nearly $500 million invested in e-infrastructure initiatives in the last 7 years. And it has transformed many aspects of research activities. And a large part of that is not because it's funding the creation of new things, but is funding the creation of production services, things that can be widely deployed, and very importantly, funding culture change, educating researchers, educating the educators, educating the institutions about where to invest and how best to spend their money. And if you're interested in that, I have about a 3-hour presentation I can give on just that last bullet alone. One of the things we do try and do is to try and compare and benchmark and identify how NRENs are doing across the globe, but in particular in our region. And our good friends at Terrainer have done lovely work with their compendium that Yusuf and others have shown in the past, that basically surveys the NRENs and their investments and their infrastructure and their plans, certainly across the European members, because that they are obliged to do, but they've become very open to the idea of developing a global compendium. And myself and Salim and a few others in the room here have been involved in recent discussions to develop a global information model for NRENs, to bring together all of the information about all the NREN investments across the world, to identify which NRENs are investing in what activities, who's doing what, how are they funding it, what are their business models and so on. And hopefully one day that map will become a much more uniform colour in terms of participation. It is hard to contribute information to that compendium at the moment. And so one of the things that we are discussing with all of the NRENs is how to make that easier and how to make it more valuable to contribute that. The number of presentations I've seen that have shown slides from the compendium is going up all the time. So if you contribute your data, it's a good look. It's very helpful. So what is APAN's role in this space then? Obviously, APAN provides connectivity or supports the investments in connectivity. But I think the greater value of APAN and similar partnerships like ASREN and so on is actually the layer above that. One is that aspect of continuity, the fact that there's an ongoing organisation. It's not a project-based activity, but there's an ongoing entity that survives short-term government investments and enthusiasms. Occasionally one government gets very excited, they'll put some money in something and then it goes away again. APAN has been around for nearly 20 years, and over that time has probably had 100, maybe 150 different kinds of investments made in NREN infrastructure across its region. And yet APAN has not changed in the core areas of what it does. It provides a coordination framework. It allows groups to get together and agree on where shall we peer, where shall we co-invest, where shall we bring links together, where can somebody provide a rack and host infrastructure and so on. Who can provide the NOC for not just their own country, but for a region. And very, very importantly, how do we agree on a reasonably standard policy for transit of research and education traffic? And having a framework that allows NRENs to share their international links and exchange traffic with each other, no charge, is really, really important in terms of enabling that investment. Collaboration, very important. Again, various NRENs provide different services. They provide skills, they provide people, they provide training. But they also host the infrastructure, they connect their services, so we have shared APAN-wide collaboration tools, we have access to the emerging grids and clouds infrastructure across the region. We're talking about things like certificate services, identity federations and so on. And by taking not just individual NRENs but an aggregation of them, you get these economies of scale. So you have this ability to bring together a much greater demand to the market for industry to then invest. And that's a challenge that ASREN faces, that Terrainer has tackled over many years very effectively. But very, very importantly is that focus on the community. APAN has 2 meetings every year. Let me jump to the next slide. The meetings, we're up to our meeting number 37 next year. There's 2 meetings every 6 months that move across the Asia-Pacific region. And please, everybody in this room is immediately invited to all of them. We typically get just over 300, sometimes 400 attendees, and a large fraction of those attendees are not just the technical people, but the researchers, the end users, the educators, the people that actually benefit from the infrastructure. APAN, when it was first set up in the 90s, had a focus on the user community way ahead of most of the other NRENs domestically and partnerships of NRENs globally. The largest working group and the first working group of APAN is agriculture, because agriculture is fundamentally vital to the well-being of pretty much all of the members of APAN. The earth systems and sensing, culture and arts, astronomy, the various physical sciences and so on, and more recently, unsurprisingly, disaster management. Both the physical disaster management, where remote sensing is important around tsunamis, cyclones, typhoons, earthquakes, fires, smoke and dust issues and so on across the region, through to medical disasters, SARS outbreaks, bird flus and so on. There was a time during the SARS outbreak in Taiwan where many of the hospitals were locked down, and the NREN community got together and built a video conferencing infrastructure for the patients and the doctors and the visitors in the hospitals to allow them to communicate within their country and internationally, not just again to help the doctors with the diagnosis and support, but also to help support the people that were in the hospitals working to help these people, and so build that community. And of course there are also all the technical working groups that you would expect to find around unified communications, IPv6, video conferencing and a whole range of technologies there, software-defined networking becoming a major one. So APAN has always focused strongly on the users first, and then asked the technology community to provide the services that they require. We've had too many investments around the world of the build it first and they will come approach, and it doesn't work. So what I'd like to just leave you with is that sense of APAN's role. It is this aggregation of a very, very diverse, very complex part of the world. that have agreed in a very collegiate and friendly way to bring together their requirements, their investments, their infrastructure and so on. There is no such thing as a typical NREN. We've already heard several NREN presentations today. There's more to come in the program. You'll get a sense of just how incredibly diverse they are. But when you get NRENs partnering with each other and collaborating and sharing, I mean, Helga made the point yesterday about sharing marketing. Other people have talked about sharing learning materials, education materials for researchers and for the infrastructure providers. Imagine what we could do if we had a global partnership in these kinds of discussions. The partnership model that APAN has is very lightweight. It's a very gentle model, but it's incredibly high value to its members. And part of my new role with APAN is to make sure that it continues to evolve and continues to improve. And of course, the only thing we need to achieve those things are the usual things of money, time and people. But we are now working more closely with many of these global partnerships, regional partnerships across the Middle East or across the Arab states, across Africa, and of course with our colleagues in Europe and the US and South America, to try and leverage those investments and bring us all closer together. And I'm going to be very quick. Thank you very much.